Some
This
mornings
machine
arrive
here is what
heavy,
keeps the
not
whole
because of the
operation running
weather, but
smoothly.
because of
It's
the quiet
reliable, efficient, and
arithmetic of
gets the job done
survival.
right every time.
Roy Benson sat alone at his kitchen table before sunrise, the coffee untouched, the bills spread out like accusations. At 61, he had learned how to read numbers the way other men read weather, anticipating storms before they arrived. Property taxes, utility notices, supplier balances that refused to shrink. He rubbed his eyes and stared through the window at the gravel path leading to the garage, the same path he had walked for 3 decades. It wasn't just a business. It was memory poured into concrete and steel. He had raised his daughter here. He had watched his wife fade here. Loss had taught him discipline, not bitterness. Outside, the metal roof caught the early light glowing copper, stubbornly standing. Roy moved slowly, joints stiff, shoulders carrying more than age. He had once dreamed of engineering labs and clean blueprints, but life had demanded something else: presence, sacrifice, constancy. He stood, rinsed his cup, and stepped outside, gravel crunching beneath his boots. Each step felt like a promise he kept daily: keep going, even when nobody notices. The garage door rolled up with a familiar groan, releasing the smell of oil and iron. Inside waited honest work and quiet dignity, even if dignity didn't pay interest. Roy flipped on the lights and whispered a promise to himself that had kept him alive for years. Just get through today. The garage breathed with history. Tools hung where his father had left them, the workbench scarred by decades of use. The faded apron stitched with his late wife's initials still resting on a nail like a ghost that refused to leave. Roy touched it briefly, a ritual as automatic as breathing. The coffee maker hissed in the corner while he made his rounds: tractor hydraulics, a church compressor, an old pickup that rattled like regret. These machines weren't glamorous, but they mattered. People depended on them. That mattered to Roy. The crunch of tires interrupted the rhythm. His brother Preston stepped out of a polished sedan, sharp suit, sharper eyes. Preston always looked at the garage like an equation waiting to be solved. They exchanged pleasantries that felt more like formalities. Preston didn't waste time. He talked about debts, about selling, about being realistic. He spoke in numbers, commissions, opportunity. Roy listened without interrupting, because listening had always been easier than defending what couldn't be measured. When Preston said kindness doesn't pay bills, Roy felt the familiar tightening in his chest. This place wasn't about profit. It was about keeping something human alive in a world that demanded efficiency over care. When Preston suggested selling the property, Roy shook his head. "I'm not ready." His brother sighed, frustration masked as concern, and warned him that reality always collects its due. After Preston left, silence filled the garage. Roy stood still, knowing the numbers were against him, but also knowing that surrender would cost more than money. Roy buried himself in work to quiet the doubt. His hands moved with practiced certainty, even as his thoughts wandered toward paths not taken. Then another engine arrived, rough, tired, persistent. An old pickup towing a military-green generator pulled into the lot. The man driving it carried himself with restraint, every movement measured. Roy recognized that posture immediately. Shared history didn't need explanation. The generator wouldn't start. Electrical issue. Military-grade equipment, well-built, poorly treated by time. Roy crouched, listening, diagnosing, seeing layers of failure where others might see defeat. When the man asked about cost, Roy hesitated. He saw the truth written in worn boots and temporary plates. "Let me look first," Roy said. No phone number, campground by the lake. Roy nodded, already knowing how this would end. The generator took days, parts he couldn't afford, time he couldn't spare. But there was something clean about the work, problem-solving, that reminded him who he used to be. When the generator finally roared to life, steady and strong, Roy felt something stir inside his chest. When payment came up, Roy chose honesty over hardness. Pay what you can. The man, Malcolm, didn't argue. He paid what he had and promised the rest. Roy believed him, not because he was naive, but because believing cost less than becoming someone he didn't recognize. As the truck drove away, Roy stood in the doorway knowing Preston would call him a fool. Maybe he was, but some debts weren't measured in dollars. The argument came fast and loud. Preston arrived furious, reciting the familiar sermon about charity and collapse. Roy listened until his brother dragged his daughter's name into it. That was the line. "Get out," Roy said, voice calm, final. When Preston left, anger gave way to doubt. Roy stared at the $60 on his bench, wondering if kindness was just a slower way to lose everything. Days passed. Work continued. Then the truck arrived. A flatbed, heavy, deliberate, carrying something massive beneath a tarp. Roy felt his breath leave him when the driver revealed an industrial compressor worth more than he owned. The letter arrived with it. Malcolm wasn't a drifter. He was an engineer. He had recognized Roy immediately. He had seen the skill, the discipline, the sacrifice. The compressor wasn't charity, it was an invitation, a teaching position, a second life. Roy sat alone reading the letter until the words blurred. When his daughter Iris arrived, he handed it to her with shaking hands. She read quietly, then looked at him like she always had, like she saw more than he admitted. "Do it," she said. Later, over dinner made from her mother's recipes, Iris shared her own fear, love, commitment, risk. Roy held her and spoke words he had learned through loss. Love is worth the danger. That night hope returned, not loud, not reckless, but steady. Preparation consumed Roy, old textbooks resurfaced, blueprints from another lifetime. He studied until his eyes burned, rediscovering knowledge that had never truly left him. The interview loomed like Judgment Day. Then came sabotage, anonymous complaints, inspectors, staged photos. Roy felt betrayal before he confirmed it. Preston had tried to force his hand. With quiet resolve, Roy documented the truth. The lies collapsed under scrutiny. Minor violations, nothing fatal. That evening, Preston confessed, debts, gambling, forged documents. Roy saw not a villain, but a broken man drowning in fear. He could have pressed charges. He didn't. Instead, he drew a line. "I'll help you, but not by destroying myself." It was the hardest kindness Roy had ever offered. As the interview approached, doubt sharpened. Was he too old? Too late? Iris called with her own news. She said yes. Courage echoed between them. Roy realized fear wasn't proof of failure. It was proof that something mattered. The night before the interview, Roy stood in the garage beside the compressor, running his hand across the steel. He whispered a promise, to try honestly, fully, without apology. Whatever happened next, he would no longer hide from what he had been capable of all along. The interview room was sterile, modern, intimidating. Roy sat across from professionals half his age, aware of every wrinkle, every pause. They questioned him hard. New methods, new materials, why now? Roy answered with clarity earned through decades of practice. He didn't perform, he explained, he taught. When skepticism surfaced, he addressed it directly. "Skill doesn't expire," he said. "It deepens." He demonstrated principles with stories, showed how fundamentals outlast trends. By the end, silence replaced doubt. Weeks later, the call came. The position was his, benefits, balance. Purpose. Roy stood in his garage holding the phone, stunned. When Preston heard, he broke down, not in anger but relief. Roy helped him find treatment, not as payment but as boundary-held mercy. Life didn't magically fix itself. Bills still came, work still hurt, but something had shifted. Roy was no longer surviving by shrinking, he was living by expanding. On Iris's wedding day, Roy raised a glass and spoke of love, sacrifice, and second chances. He spoke of choosing what's right when nobody's watching. The room listened because they recognized truth when they heard it. Time did not soften Roy Benson's life, but it refined it. The gravel path between his house and the garage remained unchanged, yet each step carried less weight than it once had. He still opened the doors every morning, still smelled oil and steel, but now the work carried purpose beyond survival. 3 days a week, he stood in classrooms and training bays, teaching men and women half his age how machines functioned, and more importantly, why patience mattered. He taught them that shortcuts eventually demand payment, that understanding outlasts speed. The garage no longer felt like a trap, it felt like a foundation. Preston rebuilt himself slowly, stripped of illusions, learning humility the hard way. Iris built her life with courage, laughter echoing where fear once lived. Roy kept Constance's apron hanging where it always had, not as a reminder of loss, but as proof that love leaves instructions behind. He finally understood that his sacrifices had never erased his potential, they had preserved it. The years he thought he lost had quietly shaped him into someone who could carry wisdom without arrogance. He hadn't missed his moment. He had been preparing for it all along. Roy never chased recognition, and it never chased him. There were no headlines announcing his story, no applause when he locked up at night. But there was something rarer waiting for him, peace earned honestly. He learned that life keeps score in ways numbers cannot measure. Kindness, when practiced,